Call to order this revenue expenditure workshop for May 6th. Give it just a couple seconds here. Start with prayer and then a moment of silence and a pledge, and then go from there. Everybody say please. We're here again tonight doing business with the Public Service District and for James Island. We ask you to guide us in all that we do and make sure that we're doing things the way that they're supposed to be done. In your son's name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Freedom of Information Act. In compliance with the Freedom of Information Act, notice of this meeting and its agenda will provide to all news media and persons requesting notification. Commissioner Brown Crouch. Commissioner Clifford. Here. Commissioner Engelmann. Here. Commissioner Laughlin.
Here.
Commissioner Platt.
Here.
Commissioner Poston. Commissioner Wilson.
Okay, we're doing a workshop, and for a change, I get to sit back and listen until the very end. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Wise and the rest of the media is more out there.
Do we have any paperwork for this?
He does, and he will be when he gets ready to start spreading. You can pass it on now.
Thank you.
I had two quick announcements. I'm passing around a change in the budget calendar. We felt like it was important to give a full week between the public hearing and the second reading of the commission, which, so you can see the highlighted 17. I think it should be standalone, transparent, and open to the public. And we'll start advertising that between the 13th and the first true budget submission will be given to you all. And keep reminding everybody that there's a public hearing on that night, and then there's a week before the actual approval. And I think that's what we should have done last year, which we didn't. We did it on the same night. So this is a change to accommodate the residents. Secondly, tonight's presentation is based on last year's budget. We wanted to do two things. We wanted to give you a comparison for the upcoming budget, and it also had the statistics available for us to be very accurate. So on the 13th, that is when we will actually present for the first time the staff's recommended budget. So next Monday. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the young man has been working extremely hard on this presentation, James Gain.
All right, if it's okay, I'm going to sit back here so I can run this a little easier rather than stand. And that's okay with everybody?
As long as Ms. White says it's okay.
If I spin this, can you still see?
Turn it a little bit.
So revenue and expenditure workshop, I figured I'd have everybody asleep within 5 minutes. And
Nothing moves.
it's not fun stuff, but it's a good thing to educate on. When my kids went to college, they asked me what they wanted to be. I said, well, don't be an accountant. You can do anything but accounting. So hopefully I won't bore you tonight, and hopefully we'll all learn something together. So revenue expenditure workshop, let's see. That pop up there? So going over the James Island PSD's accounting structure, and obviously we do those in accordance with general accepted accounting principles, and it's comprised of a number of separate fiscal entities known as funds. So just the very basics there, that we have different type of funds to keep our money and our expenditures in. And there below that, you can see, I can read it or we can read it together. A fund is defined as a fiscal and accounting entity with a self-balancing set of accounts. Fund accounting allows groups to manage the diverse streams of revenue that they receive and to monitor restrictions often attached to that revenue. And so those people who are monitoring are yourselves and the department heads and Robert. Breaking them up into different appropriate funds enables the organization to keep the revenues that it receives in the proper categories and prevents those revenues from being spent on inappropriate expenses. It provides transparency, which is what we all want, to external audiences, which is our customers, taxpayers, and also enables the organization's decision makers to plan for the future, which is your management team and the commission. We have two categories, governmental and proprietary. Proprietary is better known as our wastewater fund. And so I got the ladies to help. This wasn't something I put together. They were a huge help over in the office. A little flow chart here. And so I got the top our funds. And on the left side facing the TV, you'll see the governmental funds. There's three types. There's the general fund, the debt service fund, and the capital project fund. And I'm going to talk about each one of them. On the left side is the proprietary fund, which is the wastewater fund. So under governmental, there's three types. Under proprietary, we have the one type of fund. And just a brief, we'll wait till they come in if you want. I might need to back up one slide. Let everybody get set. You got papers in front of you that match what the slides on. We're on slide number 3. So I backed up one just so we're talking about the different type of district fund categories. And so you see James Island has two types of funds, governmental and proprietary, but under governmental we have 3 separate types, general fund, debt service fund, and capital project fund. And again, just going a little more deeper into the governmental funds, which I said there's 3 types, are used to account for all or most of a government's general activities. The district maintains 3 separate funds herein: general fund, the debt service fund, and the capital projects fund. And just a synopsis here of the general fund. The general fund is the district's general operating fund and is used to account for all financial transactions except those required to be accounted for in another fund. And our principal sources of revenue there are property taxes. And you'll see that broken down a little bit. I'll show you another chart. And this is the general fund. I did go ahead and put on there the property taxes just for anybody that didn't know how the county does those. They're an enforceable lien, January 1st, as you all know that owns property. They are paid without penalty January 15th. After January 15th, you see the following dates: 3%, an additional 7% after February 1st, March 16th, an additional 5%. And then on March 16th, the government turns unpaid taxes over to the delinquent tax officer. Properties are subject to sale. Personal property tax on vehicles are levied on a monthly basis as opposed to the annual. So just some information for Charleston County if you were ever wondering how that process happened. The debt service fund, which is also under the governmental funds, the resources there are accumulated payments made for principal and interest on long-term debt governmental funds. So anything that we go out and get a lease on, or capital leases, any of the equipment we purchase, that money is stored there. And again, that money comes from taxes. You'll see that last sentence there. We pay for capital equipment such as fire and solid waste trucks. So anything we go out and get a lease on, that money is stored there to pay that principal and interest throughout the year, or throughout the time of the loan. Fund number 3 is a capital project fund. This is account for financial resources used for the acquisition and construction of major capital facilities. And I think the most common one we're all familiar with is Fire Station 1 and the land purchase. And so money from that is accumulated over there. It's got its own set of books, and that money's put there to pay for those things. And when we get either the GO bond or the construction loan, that's where that money will be held in the capital projects fund.
Would like sewer projects be in that fund too? Or
Now that's going to be over on the proprietary side, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Those projects are over on another fund. So those are the 3 governmental funds. See if I can get a change. Whoop, not too much. So this was kind of interesting to look at. I took and said, where does the money come from for the general fund? And if you look at that chart there, 80% of it comes from property taxes and 3-1, which is our tax district. And so I took it and broke it down by 3-1, 3-5, and 3-6 for city properties that are either annexed or being moved. This is slide number 8, sorry. And property taxes 3-7 is Folly Beach. And then we get a little revenue from Folly Beach maintenance, and they're parking their vehicles back here, where Steve does some maintenance for their vehicles and brings them some revenue, and then we charge them to park. Yes, sir.
Which property taxes go with which number set?
So 3-1 is James Island PSD taxes, where Charleston County comes. 3-5 is, I believe, and Robert can bring on 3-6 it goes to first, and sits there 6 years, and then it rolls over to 3-5 when it's property annexes.
That city?
City, yes, sir, City of Charleston. And we get 100% in 3-6, and then we get a percentage based on the fire department in 3-5, when it moves to 3-5 after 6 years. Those are both city.
And as a reminder, these are numbers are from our budget last year.
Right.
So you have a comparison connected with the upcoming budget on 5/13.
And tax district 3-7 is what they're called, that's Folly Beach.
Thank you.
And then the homestead exemption comes from Charleston County, and typically it's right around $175,000 a year. We usually get that about May, so we haven't received that yet, but that's where that number comes from. And then other is just a breakdown of if we sell some assets, if we sell some metal, interest expense. I just grouped all them together because it was just a small number, didn't need all those out there. So it's interesting to see on a pie chart like that, to see that the majority comes from 3-1, 80% of our revenues for general fund. And then the flip side of that is, where does the money go? And so you'll see the breakdown of what their budgeted expenses were for 2019 for each department. Administration, fire services, fleet service, solid waste. I added in there the principal and interest payments on any general fund items. And then total capital outlay, which is as of this budget year, which includes the 2 fire trucks the chief got, and there was something else in there that we bought, 1.3, some other equipment, I don't recall right off.
Should have been the property for the fire station, right?
But that would, yeah, that's over on the debt service fund side, so I did not put that on here, the property, right?
Is that
So
pretty, is what you have there for interest pretty much a standard carry across, or?
The principal and interest, yeah, those are pretty much typically on equipment, we do 7 years. I think on the fire, we're looking 20 to 25 years, depending on what our rate does on the geo bond, or what our financial people advise us and what Robert and I decide. But those, I mean, the payment standard, yes, for the 7 years of the loans, yes.
So, but it doesn't vary too much?
No, typically doesn't, but we'll have some drop off next year that we've had for 7 years will drop off, but if we add some, right, and you'll see those next Monday night when we show you that schedule. You'll see that broken out over 5 years, how they change. Any questions there? That's the general fund. I was gonna do proprietary fund wastewater next, if nobody has any questions on the general fund. We can always go back as well. The proprietary fund, that are known as the wastewater fund. And those funds are ongoing activities of the district that are similar to those of a private sector. So that side we run like a business, like you just would a business, and it's exactly how it's run. All assets, liabilities, equities, revenues, and expenses, and any transfers in or related to district business are accounted for through those funds. Those run just like a business side as opposed to the governmental side. The district uses one type of proprietary fund, and that's the wastewater services. Again, the primary sources there are monthly billing to our residents, and that's about $550,000 a month we get in, and then the tap and impact fees for any new developments or any growth. There is some other small fees, but the majority comes from those sources. And again, this is just a breakdown of proprietary fund like we did in general. They're used to account for operations that are financed and operated in a manner similar to a private business, where the intent of the governing body, that's the commission, is that the cost, expenses including depreciation of provided services to the general public be recovered primarily through user charges. So we're trying to recover all those costs through the user charges, rather than taking loans or anything else. And that's how we operate that. Whereas the other side's based on all the taxes, this is based on the user charges. And so on the wastewater side, you'll see the difference. Where's the money come from? District customers is 87.5%. And that's all the transportation that we do. David can probably expand on that. The Folly Beach, that's our payments here for our lines, but $6.8 million. You can see on that chart what we get from impact fees from the PSD section, from the CWS, and from Folly Beach. Tap inspection fee. Miscellaneous fees is the same thing I grouped on the other one called other, which was interest expense, new account fee, late fee. It was such small items, I grouped it all together. You see the interest income was big enough for me to break it out there, $15,000. We make that on our U.S. bank debt that we have sitting out there. We actually are making interest on some of that now. Folly Beach has similar type revenue that we pay to do their pumps, and that David and them get the money for, and they contributed assets. When a developer puts in a sewer system and they contributes that asset to us upon completion. And then where does the money go? Again, you can see the breakdown by department. There's two departments. There's an administration department, which are all the ladies up front, 100% of their cost, and then David's team, and his operation and maintenance. And then you see right below operation and maintenance. Operation and maintenance is what he does to maintain the system, but you see right below that a huge portion of his that he can't control is the sewer treatment at CWS, $2.1 million, which is 32% of his budget is transporting our waste to CWS. And then there's their principal and interest payments on their projects you were asking about, and the total capital outlay for him. So he's got a chunk of the pie there that every time somebody flushes the toilet, it goes to CW to Plum Island, and we can't control that cost. It's a that cost we got, I guess, on the memorandum of understanding with them. So
We could potentially be adjusted by percentage flow. Dave's been working really hard on that to ensure that the flushes in our system are pure, and if they're not, they're from CWS, we can kick back that. I were looking at that. We also have put on a meter a few years back, which helped us monitor their meter, which they built on. So he's made some good inroads. And so with also the SSES program, he's been able to identify through that program repairs that need to be done, and usually those will be a savings on the amount of flow going into the treatment plant. And in the rate study, all that's being considered, and will be presented to CWS to see, hopefully they will accept.
Which will adjust upward the amount of money we receive from this.
Which will adjust the lowering of the sewer treatment percentage that
pay
we pay them. It might increase the transportation, which we charge them for based on our changing our rates slightly. So there'd be some minor amounts there.
that was just a quick shot of our funds, what they are, where the money comes from and where it goes. And we can certainly go back. Next, I was going to talk a little bit about budgeting and what the commission and our philosophy is on budgeting. Just so you have a synopsis before next week. Again, I hate reading word for word, but the basis of budgeting refers to the basis of accounting used to prepare the annual budgets. Except as noted below, the basis of budgeting is the same as the basis of accounting. And where it differs is the district prepares the budgets for governmental funds using the flow of current financial resources. I got that, I couldn't get that on the slide, but let's see. Current financial resources is we're using them based on near-term current inflows and outflows and the balances on accounts. And they focus measurement, in the modified accrual basis. And the modified accrual basis of which we saw in our financial statements is revenues are not recognized until they are measurable and available. And you'll see that right below that on proprietary funds, wastewater, it's used the flow of economic resources measurement, which is a set of financial statement reports all inflows and outflows and balances on accounts. Not when they're readily available, but we report them all as they affect the entity's net position. So that's the difference there. And it's an accrual basis of accounting, not the modified. And so we take into account on the wastewater side, regardless of the timing of the cash flow, we report those as they happen.
And it's also commonly called the enterprise fund.
Right.
Because it's the closest to a private company.
Private business, right? And there's the accrual basis right below it. Revenues are recorded when earned and expenses are recorded when the liability is incurred. So that's what we do on the wastewater side. I'm sorry, I didn't know I had it on the slide there. And so on our ideas on budgeting, or myself, is better manage spending and predict cash flows. Capital items are budgeted as expenses. Principal payments are budgeted expenses, and depreciation is not budgeted. And you'll see at the very bottom, for the average resident, debt service requirements, which are our payments to our loans, and capital expenses are more relevant than depreciation to our residents. I mean, the depreciation doesn't mean anything to them, whereas these do. The debt service, how much our debt and how much our expenses are for capital. So I think that's important. And if you look at our financial statements, a big number in there is always the depreciation. You'll see $1 million in depreciation, but that's just a number on a piece of paper to the accounting world. It doesn't mean anything to the residents. They're more concerned with our debt and how much money we got to pay that debt. So that's what our basis for budgeting is. And then I just put a little bit of budget or adopted on the basis consistent with accounting principles, GAAP. I mean, you all know that the district adopts an annual budget for the general fund and the proprietary fund. So next Monday night, that's what we're presenting, 2 budgets, one for each side, to be in legal compliance by law. And then just some basics again from the county that used to follow, but that we follow here at our district now is prior to June 30th, the district prepares a budget for the next succeeding fiscal year, being July 1st. The general fund is expenditures based on a modified accrual, like I said, and the proprietary is based on accrual basis of accounting. The district adopts the proposed budget by June 30th, and that's again to be in compliance with the law.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
at one point, we had, we don't need to take our budget to the county anymore,
Right.
right? We have the authority.
You all do, yes, ma'am.
We do, well, I'm sure the new people don't know that,
Right.
and I think that, new people need to know that our, budget, the county used to, okay our budget, but, in the past, couple of years.
It was 13 or 14.
Sometime
around
that,
there, 12, 13, 14.
we have the authority to approve our own budget,
Right.
so we, what do we have to give the county? We just have to, present it to them?
We present with them what approved millage rate, and we give them the appropriations. We give them one sheet appropriation, which the chair and the secretary will sign. This shows that appropriation, how much money we're getting based on those millage. That's all we give them. And you go ahead, if you got something to add.
It's just like any municipality or anybody else.
They used to take our financial statements as what they approved, and they'd roll it into their financial statements. So they'd have this financial statement that was just thick with 7 or 8, and that's stuff, they still got a lot of them like that. We broke away saying, y'all are an elected body, you can decide your own, and that's what she's referring to, and that was approved, I guess, by the county? By the
Yes, it
commission
was.
approved, okay.
About 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably 12, 13 somewhere.
Our attorneys work on that.
Right.
And the county attorneys approved and the council approved.
And so the only reason they get our appropriations and millage is so they can prepare the tax bill,
Good
if you all
collections.
know. Right, collections, right.
It's an ordinance.
Okay. I know that, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I know that, we're gonna be dealing with the budget, and, however, you know, we had some, a lot of complaints from the auditor. How are we gonna deal with that along with the budget? Are we gonna take those as 2 separate issues?
We can certainly.
Because there were things that needed to be taken care of in our budget. So, I'm asking, are we taking care of those things that the auditor pointed out?
Well, we certainly, what he pointed out to us, but if he pointed out something specific to y'all in the executive session, we don't know that right now. You'd have to let us know what those were, other than what he's told us on
Well,
our
I'm
own.
sure y'all got, the same information we got about all of, the
Yeah.
issues that need to
Right,
be addressed.
Right, and those have all
And
been addressed,
I'm
yes.
asking, were those things taken care of?
Yes, ma'am. And I think we'll show you that next Monday night.
So you'll
We-
show us where all those things were
I
taken
can
care
certainly,
of?
if that's the direction, sure,
Absolutely.
absolutely, yes.
And, the auditor, so thus far, all those things have been taken care of and it's okay, is what I'm hearing?
They are, and I can go down that list, not down
I'd
the list,
like
but I
that-
can tie
I'd
that
like
list
that
to the
because,
budget if that's,
I have not been able to sleep since I got
Okay,
that list.
sure, we can talk about that list and where it
Alright.
fits in the budget and where it's been corrected.
That was all part of the real estate.
Right, restatement, right?
Restatement.
Sure,
I only know if you gotta ask them, that's why I'm asking, so I
sure,
can.
sure. No, anytime.
All right.
And that's what we want to do here tonight, just be able to, so we're all on the same page of what we do and why we do it. So, good, thank you. Next, I think you just got the budget calendar, I put it in there, how our budget process works, where we started, start back in December, they start assembling those sheets, and then they get them out to the department heads in January, they're back in February, and you've seen the calendar enough to know how we process through. So it's a 6-7 month process, it's not just, 1 or 2 month thing we're working on. And it's a compliment to this great team here that everybody gets everything in and gets it done on time. Let's see. And since those revenue expenses, I had to put a little picture in there, but you got the fund balance components, that's over on the general fund side, and I wanted to break those down. And so that's our, if you have it at home, I guess it's like a saving, or somebody said here one night, it was different buckets. We have different buckets, and so we have the restricted bucket, money sitting in there that's restricted that we can't use except for this purpose, whether it's the fire station money. Tap and impact fees can only be used for improvements to the system, they can't be used for other things. Non-spendable, inventory and prepaid, if we have any inventory, and then prepaid expenses, that number ties to their budget and is sitting in a bucket. Unrestricted is money that's sitting there that we can use, that's a net of everything else. We have a rainy day fund that the commission said of 3%, it's committed that we can't use. Other post-employment benefits is one of the questions Ms. Brown-Croft was asking, that money's sitting there to pay that, and we come up with a figure to apply towards that payment each year to get that figure down. Next year's deficit, if any, hopefully we won't have a deficit, but if the case comes, we do, that money's sitting there. And then unassigned is 3 months of next year's operating expense. And I know Mr. Platt always asks about that in a larger figure, but we have 3 months sitting there. So really we have one bucket there that's unrestricted, and that's a net of the rest of those, of our total fund balance. And you'll see that next week, I'll have it each broke down and a total of it.
Okay, I saw you that, so whenever we do something like this, if we could, you have it restricted here, but if you kind of do the wishbone thing and indent the list of all of them underneath it.
Okay.
Same kind of thing for all
All
the
right,
rest of them.
and so next week you'll see dollars tied to each of them and why that's sitting there, and it's
Right.
3% of the total fund, and so it'll make a lot more sense, but we just wanted to go over the basics tonight of what makes up that fund balance component.
I just want to make sure that we're not missing out on.
Sure. Okay,
Um,
yes,
Probably premature, but it's been bugging me for weeks. I was told somewhere that $140,000 was taken from the fire department budget last year. Where did it go and why?
I haven't heard that.
I haven't
We
heard
addressed that on 513, we're doing the whole budget, but no, I have not heard that.
if that would have been a transfer in or out, we would have taken money from them and put it somewhere, but I do not know that. I don't think that happened, but I'll certainly look into it.
Because I kind of think they're on a shoestring as it is, and don't need to be moving out.
No, typically we don't move money from one to the others.
Okay.
So what I put in here was next was the general fund. You'll see this next week updated for fiscal year 20. And you'll see our fund balance as of this budget year was 4.5 million, and then that's when we did the 2%, $2 mil increase at the bottom. You see there where we have that for the blue column, which was this current budget year that we're in. And so next week you'll see that fund balance broke down by those accounts on the page before it. What's restricted, what's not. And so, yeah, somebody might think on paper we have 4.5 million sitting there, but we don't. It's broke down and it's itemized to where it needs to go and what it needs to go, and that's why there was a requirement for a millage increase last year.
Are you talking about the 13%? We needed 13%?
Okay, we did 2 on the general fund, and we did what, 7? It's on the next slide. We did
Wasn't it 13%?
5.5 mils on the debt service, so we did 7.5 mils.
Wasn't it 13%
Well,
that?
that is 13%. Mills and percentage are not the same thing.
Right, mils and percentage aren't the same thing, but right.
No, but I was talking about, if we're gonna talk about taxes, what was the 13% taxes? I'm not talking about millage, I'm talking about taxes.
That's what I heard, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's what when you calculate it, yes, ma'am, 13%. So that was just to give you a summary, to have some numbers to look at until we get these final numbers on the budget for this year. And then the same thing with the debt service, those are the 2 funds I was talking about. The capital projects fund, why there's not a sheet like this, is there's just expenses sitting in there right now, stuff we've paid to get the fire station to where it's at now. So there's no money sitting there, there's expenses sitting there to be paid. So there's not a separate, there is a separate set of books, but there's not a separate sheet for the budget for that. It's all rolled into the same general fund.
We've got real good justification for whatever's showing up on this additional millage on the debt service.
That was projected from last year from my predecessor. That, you'll see Monday night, there is no tax increase, but there is in the future. You'll see those projections. There's none for this fiscal year 20. Yeah, you're not approving that, but that was information as of last year, and this year, you'll see this year's next Monday night.
And projections change every year.
Right, absolutely. And that's really based on the property tax revenues that we get from the county, what their projection is.
And what the collection rates are. And so on.
Growth and everything else, right?
Unforeseen expenditures.
And then the next slide is the wastewater proprietary fund. And our big thing there is not millage, obviously, it's user rates, and you'll see those at the top where service charges come in. But it's our debt coverage ratio at the very bottom. And so the district has set that at 1, I guess the bodies who we take loans through have set it at 1.20, and we've talked about that. I know they talked about that in the rate study and at the audit. We, the district, the commission has set that to be 150, we need to take corrective action if it's at lower than 150. So that's what we use as a guide, is 1.50 on the debt service.
Planning purposes.
The 1.5, if it gets to 150, we need to take some corrective action. It's not going to change overnight. So we've set it a little higher so we don't get to that 1.2 where we were. So, and I think the commission said that a couple of years ago. And so you'll see next week that those numbers at the bottom will consistently be above 1.20, and in order to get on above 1.5, there'll be some projected millage increases down the road. Rate increases down the road based on the rate study. All right, and the rate study will be incorporated into that. You were asking about the projects. This is what the project, the capital improvement plan that David's team puts together. And you see at the top, the project that everybody knows they're doing now over there by the post office is the $6.7 million SRF loan we're getting for the pump station 2 conversion, Forest Main, is that correct? And David puts a 5-year plan together and predicts out those projects, and you'll see that that's a natural flow. His one you look at next Monday night will look different than this, based on needs and based on what needs to be fixed and where the money fits. And I think next week you'll see a live picture of where we're looking for the next 5 years.
And as I mentioned earlier, the SSES survey program identified a lot of stuff that we need to fix, and that's projected out for the next 5 years. Whether we do all of it or in it, parts or whatever, depends on the revenues at the time.
And you see at the very bottom of this year's budget, the SSE found projects, and he had predicted $1 million, but he's fine-tuned that, and you'll see next week exactly what he's predicted out there for the 5 years, based on the system. And like I said, it was going to be basic, but I don't see too many sleeping. The police guy back here might be sleeping. But if you got any discussion, questions, I'd be glad to go over anything. I think Mr. Wise, the department head, anything that we can clarify. we want it to be educational, we want y'all to understand from our perspective, since you're setting the policy, what we're trying to do and anticipate doing. So it's clear, and that you get the information like Ms. Brown-Crouch said she wants and needs.
Go back to page 21, and Commissioner Crouch asked a question on this, and I didn't understand clearly the response, but the projection for next fiscal year, net service addition, we're looking at 3.5.
Right.
Did you say this is something that, in effect, you inherited, and it'll be a different figure next week?
That was just a projection that was done last year based on the numbers. And then when we get, every year we get new numbers from the county on taxes, property taxes there at the top. And based on growth, based on the consumer product index, everything like that, those numbers change. And so this year, we don't have a millage increase for fiscal year 20 on the debt service or the general fund. But you'll see 21, 22, 23, we have some projected millage to make those, make that fund balance be able to pay that debt the next following year.
You'll see that Monday.
Right, and I'll explain that more Monday, but if you look, this payment here, basically the ending fund balance should be able to pay that total expenditures next year here. And you see it's close, 932, 904. I mean, you got anything different, we get less taxes, somebody's delinquent. So that's why there's a projected tax increase, or millage increase.
I think your cursor's showing up on the screen.
Is it up there?
I don't see it.
I don't see
The
it.
cursor's not showing up.
It doesn't on that.
So it's,
So,
the basics of the debt service fund is this payment here, this ending fund balance for this fiscal year, should be able to pay that debt next year. You see it's 932, 904. And it looks like when you plug in a 3.5, it gives a surplus here to be able to pay that the next year. We've taken that out because our property taxes, you'll see, have gone up based on the county's projections. And some of these payments have changed, some things have dropped off. So basically, I mean, the basic of this whole sheet is this should be able to pay that the following year. And so that's why this projection was done. It would do that. You can see it does all the way out. And we do about 8 years out, 10 years out. But since the taxes went up, this went away, and we plugged it over here at smaller percentages. So it's like having enough money to pay your mortgage each month. You gotta pay it. If we don't, we have a problem. And so that's where that was projected, that we would need 3.5. But the property taxes have increased pretty substantial. I guess with growth, I'm assuming, talking to Matt Guy down in the county.
You're saying property, you're saying what we get.
Right, from the county, yes ma'am. So we get, for debt service and general fund, we get the property
So
taxes.
when they take a vacant lot and they put a $500,000 house on it, we get one.
Right. Anything over this way.
and that's happening in the city more frequently than.
Right.
There's not much in county.
3.5, 3.6 of the growth.
And you'll see that growth. Those are, the projections are just simply, again, projections. They change and they're fluid each year, and you'll see those changes. Future capital leases, you'll see a bigger number than was projected there because of what the projection next year is, and so forth.
So next week, we'll be seeing the breakdown of the numbers.
Just in detail of all that, right, in each line item, right?
Yeah, that would be the staff presentation. That's why.
So everybody make sure we have something before they come.
Does anybody got anything else?
Well, sometime last year, Mrs. Glad mentioned to me that some bank, she didn't say what, maybe she didn't understand, big bank, came to her and said, oh, we can help you with the, collecting, maybe the billing or something like that, and save us money. And Susan said, well, I just told them, what am I gonna do with these 2 employees? And I was like, well, if you can save money by reducing your staff, a business person should, any business person would have done it. And so I really don't know the details of that, but, of course, I hate for anybody to lose their job, nobody likes that. But, there are ways to find other positions or ease them out or whatever, but I think anytime you can reduce staff and save money, we should do that. And, like I said, I know how it is. I've lost my job, a government job, so I know how that is. But there are ways to do that and find other positions. And there's also people retiring all the time.
Sure.
There's attrition. And so, I don't know, if anybody, bank comes to you and has some great way to save money. we
Well, I haven't
should-
heard that, and I didn't hear a proposal, but obviously with some of the department heads have done that with attrition, by getting equipment.
Like I said, I don't know what bank or
Sure.
what they were offering. I do know we send our bills up to Charlotte now. I don't know what is that bank from there? I don't know who's.
No, it's just BB&T, it's just their processing center, so it's
Yeah.
not, right.
And it might have been another bank offering the same service for
Right.
less. I'm not sure. But,
We currently do collections through the debt set-off program.
Right. And those bills go up there, all they do up there, just so it's clear, is they process the payment, but the ladies get a sheet of, if they get 600 accounts that got paid overnight, and they take those and they enter each one of them. So it's no different than somebody coming to the window paying them when they enter it, or coming to our mailbox and having to rip it open. They're just letting the machine process it, and we're still getting the report and having to enter that.
it
So,
seems like to me we could have that.
well, that's part of the process that we want to do, and that could change some of that. But yeah, we're always looking at either attrition or where we're at on budget is really the only way to cut is to reduce staff over time. I mean, that is where we're at. I mean, you'll
Well,
see that next
especially
week.
now that it's hard to find anybody, I'm sure we've got a lot of positions that aren't being filled because it's hard to find people right now.
Right.
Yeah, that seems sort of, that they have to hand, oh God, that drives me nuts.
That's our software system that we currently have, and that's why
Aren't
we're
we
looking
gonna
at
update
on
that?
changing that. And we are. That was presented to you guys.
Yeah. So if we went with this system, which I'm sure we have to, it could save us some staff time there.
Potentially it could,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of jobs people up in the office can do that if that goes to that. But sure, if we can bring that stuff in automatically, it would make sense, and you'd eliminate human error, sure,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
sure. And I think Robert and I are both advocates of that, so.
Don't we have like 13, 16 positions that are vacant that we just roll
We
over?
got 13 frozen positions, we do, across the district, yes.
Or we allocate for their salaries, but we don't fill them?
We don't,
Okay,
no.
it's,
We just froze those positions, and we
Ever
don't.
since the Depression, we started freezing positions, we've not replaced nor reallocated those.
So we're holding the position, but we're not putting any money into it.
And
Right.
government, you want to stay with your FTEs and know where you were when you ended up being, in this case, we filled 13 positions, and others have picked up the additional work.
One of the other big things that the auditor brought up was about the insurance and retention and retirement and all that. We're gonna see some numbers on this that aren't gonna give us, or Mr. Platt give us, the two of us especially, more gray hair than we have now.
We'll present a number that we're putting towards that, what we think we can afford right now, but we really need to have that conversation with ourselves and the auditor again, to how you guys can set the policy to change and reduce that number. That number's now sitting at 8.7 million after the new numbers came out. So that's something that policy would have to change to lower that number for future retirees. And I think he mentioned that, and that's something he'd come back and be glad to do a workshop on and dive deeper into and see what you guys would decide you want to do with that.
But that, not that specific, but the amounts and the dollars will be addressed in the budget process. Like we plugged 100,000 years before. I think that's a little low, and we're doing some analysis on that. That's one number we we haven't finalized.
Well, that's 8.7, that's lower than what we were talking about once upon a time. So
Yeah, it is.
That's a start.
It went down, but it goes up about, it's cost us about $750,000 a year, it's gonna increase. So unless we're plugging some money away to it, we're changing the policy. And that's what we're analyzing now, but what can we afford? What can we first look at the revenues and what can we afford to plug to it this year?
I just think there's so few organizations that are doing this insurance after you retire. And one thing we could do, I think right away, is say, new hires, don't get this deal. We could do that policy right now. That new hires don't get this insurance paying. You know, we're paying for their health insurance after they retire, which, is it Mr. Hancock said we shouldn't do. That nobody else does that. And this happens a lot in business. The new people come in, don't get the same nice deal that was offered back in better times or whatever. But he did bring that up. And so I think that would be, you know, we're not hiring too many people right now, but that would be something. And tell you the truth, they probably don't even have to know that we're doing it for everybody else. They say, this is the deal we're offering you, take it or leave it. And so, anyway.
Yes, we are looking at that, HR is looking at that, you know, the impact that we've been addressing that. So we'll probably present something in relationship to the overall dollars. Yes, ma'am?
We need to identify the policy changes. We need to identify the policy changes in order to have the actuarial scientists do the crunching
Run some
numbers.
new numbers, right?
And that's where the auditor comes in with his recommendations, do that in the special. We just need to fund a portion of it for the budget.
Currently, we have anybody hired prior to 2008 is on the plan that the state,
I can't hear you,
Sorry.
it's very difficult.
currently anyone that was hired prior to 2008 is on the same retirement plan as the state, and they get, after 10 years, they're eligible for the retiree healthcare benefit. Anyone after 2008, it's at least 15 years of service before they're eligible. And we pay all but the employee portion of the retiree cost. So someone that has just single coverage, they're paying $104 and change a month for the, but if they have a spouse on there or children, they pay the cost for that.
Okay, so the family component is held by the employee.
Right, and then also the surviving spouse can keep coverage, but they pay the total cost of that.
Yeah, we did make some grandfathering during 2008, and the state made some changes, we adopted those.
But even a lot of places, like you said, drop the surviving spouse because there's an implied benefit being in a group that they wouldn't get. So there's a benefit to them even though they're paying the full cost of being in a group. So there's some things to think about.
Getting a little bit into philosophy here, and that's not bad. And certainly cost has to be controlled. But it seems to be appropriate to prioritize, various expenditures and projected expenditures. And I would think one of the last things we want to tamper with is retirement benefits for new hires. Eventually, they're going to be as old as they're not going to be. And, it would be some comfort for all the years they're working. They'll have health insurance. Almost every night on the evening news and television, there's stories about people having difficulty, some young families, and often it's retirees and fixed incomes, and medical expenses overall are not going down, they're going up. So again, I think that Might have to do it, but I would hope it'd be one of the last things, but.
Well, I'm on the board of James Island Outreach, and you've got a point there. 70% of our clients are senior citizens that can't afford food and medication. So I know what you're talking about there. But then again, very few businesses offer to pay your health insurance after you retire. Very few government organizations do. And that's what Mr. Hancock told us. And I know I can retire from Berkeley County, the state plan, and I'm not getting the same benefit as these people here are getting. We are doing something sort of that nobody else does.
Ordinary.
We're paying for the full, most of the time you're paying part of it, but we're paying quite a bit of it. And, you know, and these same senior citizens I'm talking about are crying, my property taxes are high. Why are they high? Because we're paying somebody else's. It just sort of goes around and around, Eugene. I get your point, but, so, and I see it.
I see yours too.
So, anyway, the insurance component is still in the mix, is that the idea? And we don't have real hard numbers that we're playing with yet?
Well, we've got it narrowed down, but we need to it's the amount we donate this year. That's really the key right now. It was 100,000 last year, and we know that's not a reality. So once we plug that number in, it'll change what all of the budget numbers roll to. But I do agree that we need to get with Hancock and you know, maybe get a couple commissioners on a ad hoc committee, sit down and talk about it, set up a policy for the benefit side. HR should be, I think, the driving force in that, since that's their expertise. And James needs to be involved on the financial side. So, you know, I think that's definitely something we need to do. You know, we're gonna still fund what we've already, you know, committed to, but doesn't mean we can't. But in 2008, that has helped. You know, there was a drop off and there was a change. So hopefully, with that grandfather and adding it to 15 years instead of 10, that's 5 more years. Of course, the actuary tables are what they are.
Keep texting and driving.
Keeps us in business.
Right.
Ms. Engelmann, do you have anything
Not till I actually see numbers. That's
no
what's,
problem
that's
to?
what's gonna help me is when I actually see numbers.
Are we gonna be getting any kind of emails prior to the meeting, where, like in a packet?
We'll put it in the packet if you'd
Or
like.
are we gonna actually, like tonight, get it?
No, we can put the budget in the packet. You know.
I'd like to have it a little ahead of time so I can sit and look at it anyway.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah, this is a presentation for just explanation, education. The next one is for the numbers, but it means nothing other than we'll give you time, of course, and you will have multiple
well,
days
you know,
to
my
change
problem, my problem is I have my income and I have my outgo, and it's hard enough for me to balance my own checkbook and not start throwing
Yeah,
all this
no,
other
we'd be
stuff
more than
in
happy to
there.
put it in the package for them, you know, absolutely.
Okay, would you?
Yeah, the criticism last year was that the public hearing was held at the same time as the second reading, there's not enough time. So we're recommending that we go on and change it a week ahead, publicize starting after the May 13th meeting, that there's a public hearing for the budget for FY20, and keep telling them about it until the day of that. We have to advertise 16 days, which you'll see that advertising day is ahead, but we're gonna put it on the website, we're gonna put it on social media.
Well, I would like to have that public hearing before the first reading. I think that was one of the main criticisms I heard, that we had already decided. You know, they came in here and they said, y'all already decided because you already voted on it.
Well,
So I would
no,
like to see that.
The thing about it is that for us to be able to consider it, it has to go, be presented to the commission, so that it's part of our agenda, of item. And, you know, between the first and the second reading, amendments can be made, adjustments can be made, and so on like
The whole
that.
budget can be changed. The whole budget can be changed.
Yeah, so by having the public hearing a week before the second reading, that gives us the time to make whatever
listen to
kind
the
of
public, make
changes
changes.
need to be done. But, now, as far as the Robert's rules and all that kind of thing, we can't, do anything with the, budget until it's
It has to be announced
a
before the public.
motion.
First, it has to be like, hey, this is it, then you get to take in your changes, your rebuttals, your amendments, and then
Right.
you have the second reading in its final form after you get the feedback from the constituents and the customers. Because
But-
otherwise, you're just fine by the city.
But we have to put it on our docket
Absolutely.
before we can do a public hearing and amendments and then do the final reading on it, right?
That's the way I understand it.
So that's
Okay,
the reason.
on that last one on 7-1, is that the way you spell financial? It won't come to me.
Where you at?
The last item on the,
No, it's FINANCIA.
I
It's
thought
just a typo.
so.
Wrong, it's on you though.
But you know, when I looked at it, even
It's
spelling
big.
it that way, I said, that's not right.
You're thinking of fiance. Somebody's trying to get married.
Yeah.
Mr.
well,
Knight,
James is single.
do you have anything that we need to make sure that gets addressed?
Well, just looking ahead, regarding public hearing and giving the public just a few, Ms. Swamp indicated that you'd like to have, some material before the next meeting. I think it would be, well, at least to have a summary of the proposed budget on the website prior to the public hearing, and,
We
you know,
normally put out the first reading, the one that was there, so that they can look at it and talk about it, but we can do a summary with it too.
I have no idea what percentage of our constituents visit, these constituents.
Well, we'll put it out on the social media again and link it back to our website and let everybody in the world know. That's what we're starting right after 5:30.
And as you get the information, you compare it to what the auditor's report revealed, and then you kind of fill it out that way, is what I was gonna plan on doing.
Thank you.
We've got, it's been, as far as I can tell, that's
Dave,
been
I'm ready.
free money in Facebook advertising. And, last time I checked, our Facebook page had like 600-700 people, I don't know.
A little bit more than that.
But for under $50, you can reach 10,000 people.
And we're doing that. After we had a meeting with Ms. Poston, she actually asked us to go over to the next door, which we had not been doing.
Yeah, that's important.
And so we're handling, good night.
Night.
So yeah, we're boosting and we're advertising.
Boosting good, but it's good money. It's, compared to newspaper, it's dirt cheap. And nobody reads it.
And we're hoping that the advertisement grabs this other entity and this other entity. We've got a lot of linking going on there, and that's what we want.
Do you have anything?
Well, I just have one thing that, as chairman of the fire department, I just hope that, we include the, fire engine for this year in the budget. The new fire, truck. I hope that's in the budget for, this year, because remember, we put it off last year and we're gonna get the new fire truck this year. I just hope that we include that in the budget. That's all I have to say.
Ms. Cleary,
I'm good.
you're good?
I gotta go count some numbers and look at some stuff, but other than that, I'll talk when I have a better idea of what I'm gonna.
And in that case, I'd like to hear a motion for.
So moved.
That's right, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Brown Crouch,
Yes.
Commissioner Clifford,
Yes.
Commissioner Engelmann, Commissioner Laughlin,
Yes.
Commissioner Platt.
Aye.
Commissioner Poston, Commissioner Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
We're adjourned. Thank you all for coming.